And about 10 years ago. Ready? Okay. Good morning. Thanks for tuning in on Facebook Live and on YouTube. We were just talking about taxes. One of the things that, if you work here with us, a lot of our money is held at Charles Schwab. And TD Ameritrade, of course, was acquired by Charles Schwab in 2019, but they actually merged the companies for tax forms and account information last year in September. And so there is a likelihood that you probably got 2 1099s from both companies, because of the merger. So do not forget that for your taxes. We have contacted every customer, and we have got all the forms here. So if you need them, let us know. Call us anytime, 931-728-2130. But do not forget to have those forms if you need them for your taxes. Okay, so I thought this is pretty cool. So has anybody ever heard of the company ASMIL? Anybody ever heard of this company before? Well, I can't pronounce it. It's a great question, but I should have. But it's a Dutch company, and what's very interesting is this is the company that makes all the sophisticated equipment that makes very high-tech microchips. So if you remember President Biden about 6 weeks ago, he specifically reached out to this company and said, "You've got to stop selling your tools to China." Because this one company makes all, if you pull up Darla's cell phone, Brian's got my phone back there, all your cell phone, all the equipment that actually makes the microchips is pretty much bought from this one company in the Netherlands. Now, what's really interesting about that is this company is mad at its own country, the Netherlands, because the Netherlands is against immigration. They have a new president. Well, he's been around for a while, very anti-Islamic president. And they are talking about moving the entire company to France and leaving the Netherlands. They just threatened that this week. But what's happening is they can't get enough workers. Imagine that, right? Common problem. And so if you look at ASML, this is the only company in Europe that is one of the top technology companies by market valuation. It is right behind, or right ahead of, AMD and Samsung, about the same size as MasterCard. Okay? Now what's interesting is 20% of the Dutch stock market is this one company. 20% of their entire stock market is in one company. And so about 40% of their workforce is not Dutch. Obviously Netherlands is a small country. Oddly enough, they actually had the biggest natural gas field that they stopped using here recently, or they're in the process of shutting down because it causes little earthquakes in the Netherlands. And so one of the things that whenever Russia invaded Ukraine, natural gas became a premier commodity, and everybody was mad at the Netherlands because you're like, why are you guys shutting down your natural gas? It's right there in the middle of Europe. You can send it everywhere, and blah, blah, blah. But it's interesting because as we look at what's going on in our country with an election this year, the number one issue right now, according to voters, is immigration. That's the number one U.S. issue. But ASML is saying they'll move to France, and all their workers will work 35 hours a week and retire early because France will let immigrants come in the country if the Netherlands does not let them get the workers. It's one of the most important things when you look at immigration is it's who you bring in the country, right? Obviously, I don't think anybody here is really for illegal immigration, but if you get the right people here that will contribute, that's a win, and that's the whole thing, and that's what they're talking about here in the Netherlands. But as we look at artificial intelligence, where we're seeing so much money being invested, there's basically an issue where one industry is taking over. They actually call it Dutch disease, where you have one part of the economy is so strong it causes a crisis. And you're starting to see that here even a little bit in our stock market, where you're seeing a lot of these companies related to artificial intelligence are just flat out booming. They are just making a ton of money. And ASMIL is basically saying, hey, look, if you want to keep us in the country, you're going to have to bring in immigrants. You're going to have to bring in the workforce we need. And that's why you're seeing, a lot of changes. But this company right here, they basically make all the machines that make the sophisticated chips. So without this company, you don't have your cell phones where they are. They don't have the power they have. Our ability to live stream this video on YouTube at the speed it happens because of the equipment, some of the equipment they make. And so it's very interesting. The same things that are going on here in America when we're talking about immigration and those situations, that's happening around the world. And why do you guys think that's really happening? Why is there such a problem with the workforce? It's not really lazy people. That's not true. What do you think it is? I mean, it's part of it, but not. There's always been lazy people, right? Not enough people. Every country involved in World War II had a baby boom. And then they didn't have another one, except for us. We had the millennials. We were like one of the only countries on earth, the only country involved in World War II that had basically a second boom. If you guys are familiar with Canada, Canada didn't have a second boom. So Canada has a ton of immigration. Tons of people immigrate to Canada. They couldn't get enough people, so they got in more immigrants. And so all of these countries don't have the birth rate to support the population. And our country's birth rate's dropping too. And so what that does is without more kids, someone's got to support all the retirees, right? And if you look at the workforce, I think it's like 160 million people, and I'm just guessing, I can't remember the number from last week's report, but there's 160 million people working. Well, there's 300 million people in the country. Do the math on that, right? That means half the people are either kids, aren't working, or are retired. So one half's got to support the, and so whether that be off investments or what it is, it makes a huge impact on the economy. And, a country's ability to attract a workforce is huge. Look at China right now, right? China put the one-child policy in effect, right? And so they only can have one kid. Then in Chinese culture, they aborted a lot more women than men because men tend to take care of the family. And so there's a disproportionate number of men and women in China. And so what that means is, contrary to popular belief, I can't have a baby, right? And since I can't have a baby, the population can't really what? Increase. And so what you're seeing in China, part of it is China is falling apart because of the United States conflict and the European conflict, potentially. But a lot of it is there just aren't any people. Because remember, and that policy started in the 1970s, which means all those kids would now be 50 years old and start declining. Well, you hit your peak income about what age? Do you guys know? About 55. And all those people are what? One of the largest groups of immigrants that have been coming to America are Chinese immigrants that are in the middle class. They're coming here because they're being worked to death. 60, 70 hours a week, minimum work week. A lot easier to work here for 40, So I'm just saying this whole thing is a big part of it. And in today's inflation report, it is the number one driver of inflation is labor cost. My most expensive thing in this office is not this building. I could buy this building every year for what I paid for it, for what we spend in labor. Multiple times, probably every 6 months, 5 months. Labor is the most expensive thing there is, right? Okay. So I had another little fun fact. And this is on, if you guys are familiar with the country of Monaco. And I kind of just caught this. One of my favorite things to do if you ever want to read good information is don't read the first 3 or 4 stories, whatever. But go down like story number 12 or 15, and you can find cool stuff. That's where the actual information is, right? Because like the big picture is like what people want to see, but this is actually a pretty cool little tidbit, in my opinion. Okay, So the story quote from Bloomberg yesterday is Monaco royals bring perils to palace doors. Prince Albert's government underscores need for financial crimes. So basically what we find out is that Monaco has been running a really weird situation. So first off, Monaco is a tax haven. You guys know where Monaco is? Anybody know? So Monaco, you got France right here, right? Which I won't draw it because it'd be worse. And then you got Italy right here, right? That little boot thingy, whatever. And Monaco sits right here, this little small place. And all these rich people live there. Why do they live there?
No tax.
No taxes. So they can have this little country of super wealthy people that don't pay taxes. But oddly enough, the king of Monaco, they hide their money in Panama, which is very, very amusing to me, that he actually trusts the country of Panama more than his own tax shelters. But I guess if you're king, you're always worried about being de-kinged or killed, so you got to hold your money somewhere else, right? That's the number one rule. I mean, it's always funny when I used to live in California, I used to live in Malibu, and you have all these houses, well, no one lives in them. Well, what's the point? Why do all these houses here if nobody lives in them? Well, because if the king of Saudi Arabia decides to get killed one day, and he's got to run away in a plane, he's got somewhere to live. And he puts his money in housing because it's easier to siphon the money into the country. That's why if you look at places like, I was in Fort Lauderdale, you got all these big yachts. Well, what's cool about a yacht? You can move it, right? So even though the resale value might be only 9 or 10% of what you paid for it, getting your head cut off, you can't take much cash with you, right? So if you can get out and you can get on a boat, all those big Russian yachts, they're all sailing around. Actually, I was talking to one of the boat captains we were on, and he's like, yeah, they're all in the Bahamas right now with their transponders off, so they can't find them. So one of the number one things you do is you put money in places like the United States and in other countries, in case things go bad, you can run away. It's all about diversification, right? Even when you guys look at your investments, you're trying to diversify your risk. You're not a king, you're not a despot, so your chances of being beheaded are low. But if you were the king of Bahrain, your chances of being murdered are what? They're pretty high. They're very high. And so the king of Monaco had a chief advisor named Claude Polero. And so what happened was, of course, that he gets in trouble, he gets fired. So what does he do when he gets fired? He starts spilling the beans. Here's what I've been doing. One example is, so I guess the king of Monaco's wife is really bad about being on a budget. So she always overspends her allowance. So he goes out and he just would just put money in her account for her. Well, apparently the king of Monaco needs an extra apartment, which nobody knows about. Can't imagine what goes on there. So he put it in his name, and he paid for it himself. That way it wouldn't be on the books. Another thing is, so the Prince Albert had a couple nephews, Andrea and Pierre, and apparently they're very tall, handsome, blonde-headed looking model guys. And they're getting favors. So they wanted to build a hotel near the Casino de Royale, the big casino from James Bond, I think the original James Bond was probably in that casino or one of them. And they got to build an apartment complex right next to it. And whenever everyone said that shouldn't be there, the king went in and said, no, it's going to be there. Also, apparently, have you guys ever been to France? Have you ever been to France? There's a place called the French Riviera. And there's a place called Nice, which is like a big beach area. Well, a lot of people will go to France and they'll fly in a helicopter from France to Monaco. Well, Monaco only gives one company the right to have the helicopter contract to move the money over, or to move people over. But that's money. And guess who got the contract? Oh, his nephews did. They got a year in advance warning of what the bid was going to be, so they could bid it before everybody else even knew what it was. And so that's why he's getting in trouble right now, because all these governments, because that helicopter lands in France and lands in Italy, the European Union and the government of Monaco has been seizing all these records and getting him in trouble, because it's very lucrative if you have that contract, because only one company can fly a helicopter in that city. Which is very odd, right? The helicopters, you would think you could have more than one helicopter, or more than one helicopter competition. And so another thing that's happening is they may put Monaco on a gray list, which is basically the same list that Syria, Haiti. If you guys noticed today, Haiti, the Prime Minister of Haiti said he's going to resign today, thankfully. That place is getting ready to explode. Actually already has. The gangs have taken over the whole country. There's so many dead people on the streets because people won't even pick them up that it smells like dead flesh right now. That's actually, terrible, but that's what's going on. I talked to some Haitians when I was in Florida, actually asking them how, because they got family there. And so one of the things they found out here is the Supreme Court, somebody hacked into the Monaco Supreme Court and found that they were getting paid under the table. So one of the things that's very interesting is now that cash has gone away and everything's more digital, it means you can what? You can track it. You can track it, right? You can transfer it easy, right? And everybody's like, well, when did the government had a war on cash? No, you know who put the war on cash? That was Burger King. I always remember when I was a kid cutting grass, like whenever Burger King started taking credit cards. You remember, it used to be a Whopper was so cheap, you just what? It's $1. Here's $1. And the credit cards cost fees, right? I'm not going to pay a fee to buy a Whopper. So what happened? They stopped charging the fee and they started charging $10 for a Whopper. So I'm just telling you, they got really smart financial people. Oh, we'll charge more money and let everybody just swipe. Like I went to go pay the hotel room. Oh, we don't have your bill yet. It'll go on your credit card. What? I want to see what my bill is before I leave. You know what I mean? Because I know if there's a fake charge. And so when we're looking at what's happening is now that cash has pretty much gone out of style, you can't use it. People are like, when's cash going to go away? Well, cash has pretty much already gone away. If you don't believe me, go try to buy a house with cash. Or even come here. Guess what? Guess who doesn't take cash? I'm not taking that. I'm going to turn you into a terrorist. I mean, it's not worth it. You go to your bank, deposit it, and then they'll do the reports. I'm not taking that risk. Darla might want to buy a new car or something. She goes out and gets I'll have to have cameras everywhere. It'd be terrible. It'd be rough here. And so, as we're seeing this war on cash, this just continues. Another thing that shows this is the IRS put out there's 25,000 cases of people that made more than $1 million last year that did not file tax returns. They didn't even file a return. There was over 100,000 people that made between $400,000 and $1 million that did not file tax returns either. That means there's 125,000 people making more than $400,000 a year that did not file a tax return. That's crazy.
Is it generally young people that just don't know it?
I have no idea, Darla. I would say it's probably people that are committing fraud. Because everybody knows, it's like everyone here, you got all those tax forms. Everyone here, we got to get our tax forms. Well, if you make $1 million a year, you're probably getting a tax form. And if you just decide to chuck it, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't have any mercy from you when you go to jail. They should go to jail. Yes. I mean, there's no doubt they should go. If you don't file a tax return, you should be. But
how do they know the number and do they not prosecute them?
Great question, Linda. So basically, they now require me. This year, I think it's $1,000. Anybody I pay more than $1,000 to, I have to send a 1099. See, back when I mowed lawns and I worked in cash, which this is recording, there wasn't a lot of reporting going on. Let's just say, oh crap, I'm going to get in trouble myself. Anyway, and so the thing about now that we did stuff, we had a different structure because we did pay Social Security, so I've been paying Social Security since then. So I didn't report my taxes, but I set up a scholarship fund for me and my brother. Actually, my accountant did. And so now you have to 1099 everybody. So what happens is the 2012 financial reform law, which was supposed to protect you from banks and all the evils that these big banks are doing to you, required everything to be reported. And so what that meant was, let's give you an example. Let's say you've got Phil back there. Let's say he bought a stock back in 1987 and he spent $1,000 on it. And now that stock's worth $100,000. Well, they didn't require me to report that information. Who was that on? Phil. And he's got to self-report it. So if they audited Phil, they would ask, hey, Phil, where's your copy of your receipt? What did you pay for that stock? But let's say Phil wasn't who Phil is, because Phil's an honest guy. Let's say Phil says, you know, I paid $80,000 for that stock. I didn't pay $100,000. Well, guess what? The IRS has got to find the records that he paid what? And the records from 87, they're hard to get a hold of. So the 2012 financial reform law changed all that. They now made me responsible for reporting what Phil paid for that. They also, now, like, give you an example, I've got some customers that gamble a lot, and they're bookies. And so anytime they do a gambling transaction, it has to be reported to 1099. Because now gambling's legal. Like, you know, it's terrible. I hate it, because I went to a baseball game, went to spring training game with my kids, and the whole time, anybody want to buy a raffle ticket? 50-50, Cardinals get 50% of it, and someone's going to win, you know, $8,000. They're gambling. And Major League Baseball is okay with it because they're getting a cut of the money. Remember the White Sox? They cheated in the World Series because they got paid by gamblers to cheat. So what did they do? You're banned from baseball. Now baseball's saying, as long as we get paid, we don't care. You know, if you look at sports betting, it's a huge industry. They pretty much own all the sports networks now. And I don't like gambling. I don't like the lottery. I don't like any of that stuff personally because statistically it's a bad idea. It hurts poor people. Because most of the people that gamble are people that are frivolous with their money because you don't have a statistics of winning. For example, you know, we were doing a boat tour of Fort Lauderdale because they got a lot of big houses. And somebody had just won the $200 million lottery. So what's the first thing they were doing? They're building a $60 million house. Yeah, that house is going to go for sale soon. They're going to lose it. I can tell you right now, because if your first plan is buying a big house, good way to go broke. You might want to find some income-producing assets first. You know, get some income. And so when you're looking at the 1099 reporting, what this is doing is it's making all transactions reportable. And so all this new money for the IRS is connected, in my opinion, to all these transactions being checked. Because it's not going to be very hard for a computer software to say, your 1099 here's, like when I got audited, they had all my 1099s right here. They printed them because they sent them to them. And Wells Fargo had sent me 2 1099s. I thought they only sent me one. They sent one to my grandma's house, and I didn't get it, which is why I got audited. I didn't get the 1099. So all the software system saw, here is $9,000 that didn't get reported as income. So you're due for a audit. So now it's going to be very easy to audit everyone in this room because all they got to do is everything's reportable. And all the companies are required to give that to the IRS. So every one of you guys will have a profile with the IRS. This is how much money you made. Where'd you spend it? You know, that's why it's like one of the things I preach here at our office is so important. Whenever we code transactions, we code them right because we're telling the IRS, you did what? You rolled that over. And so this is the way to go. This is the way the IRS is going to get more money because all these people are doing their taxes wrong or they're not even filing them. They're going to get some money off these people. And they should, in my opinion. They're cheating. You guys aren't cheaters. They're cheaters. They should get in trouble. That's just my personal opinion. But it doesn't change the fact that the whole world has gone digital. And this kind of leads to our next story. If you look at Bitcoin, it actually hit yesterday $72,130, up from $16,529 on December 30th of 2022. Look at that rise. It's crazy. What's always interesting to me is gold on December 31st was $1,828 an ounce and is $2,189 an ounce. Now, what's weird about gold to me is in 2008, gold hit $2,000 an ounce. Now, I don't know about you, but who would like to go back to 2008 prices on everything? Yeah, everything was cheaper, right? Think about gold, right? Back then, when we had that election in 2008, if you made over $250,000 a year, you were considered to be rich. Does $250,000 a year in income make you rich today? It doesn't. But gold was $2,000 an ounce in 2008, and now it's only $2,189 an ounce. Now, Bitcoin has gone up like crazy. It has rallied like nuts. Now, what I'm trying to understand is I feel like Bitcoin has replaced gold. If you think about it this way, right? Is it very easy to use gold? Could you guys go to Starbucks right now and give them a gold coin and use the money? No. Could you do anything with gold, really? Yeah, that's too heavy. Yeah, I messed with it too, right? Like, you know, if you start seeing me with a gold bar walking around, my pants are going to probably break. And I'm like, here you go. Okay, just shave off an ounce. You know, take your knife and just cut off an ounce. You know, or hold on, let me test it, right? Like I have a friend of mine who's a gold buyer, and he's like, well, here's the 5 rings where someone took me where I didn't test the gold. Somebody put something else in it and fake, because you can put other metals in it and steal it. So like when you're trading gold, you also got to say, do I really trust Hayden with that gold bar? Or is that thing full of, you know, steel? Right? And so you look at it, one of the biggest challenges with gold is it's not easy to use. It's not easy to transfer. If you guys weren't already aware, Russia right now, for a while there, was trying to trade everything in gold. So think about this, right? A Russian oil tanker, which is normally a Greek oil tanker, because most of the Russian oil tankers are actually Greek. A Greek oil tanker carries Russian oil. So you got a nervous Russian guy in there, right? Here he is. He's on this boat sailing from the Black Sea past all these Ukrainian drones, going all the way down into India. And he's at the gates, at the docks, and he's like, okay, I want my gold bars now. Think about that. And then he's getting all this gold, right? And then he's got to get on a plane with it, and he's got to fly back to Russia. Now, how efficient is that? That's pretty dumb, right? Because that's a lot of gold. It's a pain in the butt. And then when by the way, if you go on Amazon right now, click on Amazon, a gold ounce sells for like $2,800 an ounce. Wait a minute, I thought it was $2,189. Because they're charging a 30% commission to sell you the gold. Which means if you want to sell your gold, you got to pay what? 30% commission. Well, who wants to throw 60% of your money away? Okay, so if you think about it, this is why gold has basically not done its job. Gold is supposed to be an inflation hedge. When there's only supposed to be so much gold, there's more people, and so the price of gold should be what? I mean, everything, just from 2019, everything costs 20 to 25% more money from 2019 until today. From 2008 till today, I mean, think about that. You could buy a house in Manchester, a house that sells for like $250,000 to $275,000 today, was selling for what, $80,000 here? Back then? And just drive around. Go look at last sold for. You just look at some houses that have sold. You'll see that. And that's what you're looking at where you look at Bitcoin. Now, obviously we know there are countries with capital controls. What is a capital control? Do you guys know what that is? If you call me today and say, Brent, I want you to wire money to Russia, what am I going to tell you? I'm not doing it. Find someone else. I ain't going to jail. I'm not doing it. Can't do it. In these countries, like if you're in some of these countries, you're not allowed to get your own money out. Your money's there, but you can't what? Now, if you call me today and say, Brent, wire me $500,000 to my checking account at Ascend Federal Credit Union, what am I going to say? Sure, your money. Here you go. No big deal, because we have a free-floating economy. We have, your money is your money. If you guys remember, this is why the American dollar is so strong. Because like when that unemployment report came out, the American dollar moved the entire world currencies at about 7:32 a.m. this morning. When you guys are probably drinking a cup of coffee, the whole currency market was moving. But in a capital control economy, that means a country sets the price. They tell you what it's worth. Would you want Joe Biden or Donald Trump telling you what your money's worth? I don't. I want the market to decide. I don't want anybody telling me what money's worth. I want the market to decide. Well, in a capital controlled economy, the market doesn't decide, the government decides. Which means the government always lies. Here, everywhere. You know? Just like in 2012, right? The whole idea with that financial reform law was to make sure the banks didn't hurt us again. But then, wait a minute, I have to get tax forms and all my stuff? It was a tax grab. They're raising all your taxes. That's what it was. And so, when you're looking at this is why the U.S. dollar has always been supreme. Now, let me give you an example. People talk about gold, Bitcoin, everything. There's this little country called Cyprus. You guys ever heard of it? Mm-hmm. So Cyprus is half Greek and half what? Turkish. Okay? So it goes back to, I won't go into history because I'll take 30 minutes. But half the country is Greek, half the country is Turkish. Okay? The Greeks and the Turks still want to kill each other. They hate each other, pretty much. They've hated each other for a long time. It goes back to, Ottoman Empire versus the Byzantine Empire. There's a lot of issues there. Okay, so Cyprus is half Greek, half Turkish. Well, if you guys remember, in the 2010s, 2012s, when we were doing Investment Insight, there was a big event happening in Europe. What was it? What country was in so much trouble? Greece. Greece was out of money, and they needed a bailout. Well, when your country runs out of money, where does that country turn to first to get? By the way, anybody have a checking account here? I do. You guys don't have checking accounts? I think you guys have checking accounts. Okay. Where does the bank put its money that you give them? In your checking account. We can't loan it out, right? Because you got to be able to access it. So where do they park it? Federal Reserve. It all gets parked at the Federal Reserve. Well, who basically controls the Federal Reserve? U.S. government. Okay? So when the Greek government, and the Greeks had the same system, by the way. When the Greek government got in trouble, all these banks had given their money to of Greece, the Greek government. So when the Greek government ran out of money, they stole all the money from their banks. And those bank holders were people just like you guys. Okay? Well, there's this country called Cyprus. And Cyprus is half Greek. And all the Russians love, I don't know if you guys knew Russian history. So Russia, basically when Constantinople fell, a lot of the Greeks immigrated and Greek Orthodoxy went to Russia. So the Greeks and the Russians have a long history that goes back much longer than we've been alive, 500, 600 years. Even longer than that, 1,000 years, because the Tsar converted to Greek Orthodox. And so all these Cyprus banks, which are Greek, put all their money in Greece. And so the Europeans don't really like the Russians because the Russians steal money, they money launder, they do all these illegal things, and they did it all through Cyprus. So the Europeans got mad, and they just stole half the money in the bank accounts in Cyprus. So they just stole half the Russians' money. Now, if someone steals half your money, do you give them more money? No, you start looking for what? Alternatives. And so the reason why the euro will never replace the dollar is because we don't steal drug dealers' money. Right? But the Europeans do. And that's a big distinction because when you have a dollar, it's worth a, now it might be hard to use it, but there still is a value. And so why Bitcoin is so attractive is the idea is it's very easy for you to use what? You can pick your phone up right now and you can transfer Bitcoin and convert it into dollars at will. So if you're Russia and you're China, you can buy gold, right? What's the problem with gold? Right? And it's hard to use it. You can't get enough dollars because, I don't know if you guys read this, the Federal Reserve is printing more money. We have double as much money outside our country as in our country. But they're trying to get more physical dollars for other countries. Because so many other countries don't trust their own currency, they use what? Our money. You know, there's a president of Argentina. He says, you know what? Forget having a Federal Reserve. We're just going to adopt the U.S. dollar. No more pesos. We'll go to dollars. He's smart. Let America pay for us. Right? Let them establish the rate. And he's already smart because anybody worth anything already has converted their money to dollars anyway. So he's like, let's just finish it up. You know what? You guys know Ecuador? Ecuador only uses U.S. dollars. They don't have a currency. And so why Bitcoin appears to be attractive is the idea with Bitcoin is there's a limited supply. But the thing is, when your price of your money goes from $16,529 to $72,000 in a year, that money is not going to be stable. It's not stable. So it can't really replace the U.S. dollar because who would want, right now, who wants to sell this? If you made that much money, do you want to sell it and buy a cup of Joe? Coffee? They say in Australia, Joe? No. You're going to hold it. You're holding it as a investment. Is it going to drop a lot too at some point? Yes. The entire time this thing has existed, it has been wild and crazy. It goes up, it goes down, it goes nuts. And it'll crash again. So you're not going to use it as a currency because it's not stable. The American dollar has moved like 1% this year. Bitcoin's already moved, 50%. I'm just joking. I got to look the number up. I can't remember off the top of my head. And so it's not stable, but you are seeing this big rise. It's also very easy to steal money with Bitcoin because if somebody has your passwords, they have your what? They got your money. The only thing securing your money is your password. No. There is nobody to call. If someone steals all your money, it is what? Gone. And if you think about it, when the U.S. government said that Russia and China can no longer be using mainly Russia, no more using the U.S. dollar, and Chinese banks can't trade in energy with U.S. dollars, what are they saying? Find something else. Because people are still going to get their oil. They're still going to get their stuff, right? But they can't use the SWIFT trading system to do it. And so that's why you're seeing this big rise in Bitcoin. I still don't believe in it as a currency, and I still believe the government can steal it at will. If it's on a computer, if it's on the internet, I still believe someone can what? Take it. Yes, Chris?
Blockchain.
Okay, so blockchain is this idea. So you have, and I'm going to try to explain it because I'm not an expert. But let's say you've got me and Dean here. And he's selling me his Bitcoin for one of his bowls. If you guys knew Dean makes amazing wooden bowls. I'm not joking. And so I go out there and I say, Dean, I'm going to pay you this much in Bitcoin. The idea of a blockchain is you have an exchange that shows where we traded, but blockchain is where all these different computers around the world record the transaction. That way, when that transaction is recorded, if you hack one computer, you haven't hacked all 10,000 of them, and so all of the computers recording the transaction save the data and make it what? Secure. So you got a computer here, you got a computer in Iceland, you got a computer in China, you got a computer in Australia, and all those computers are recording the transaction. That way it's a blockchain. It's all secure. And because it's digital, because everybody knows the same transaction, that's how it goes. Now, to me, if I was a hacker, I would hack the exchange that sends out the information telling us we made the trade. Instead of me buying those bowls, Dean's money goes to Phil back there. And that's where most of the Bitcoins get stolen, is you hack the exchange. That's, I think, 16 or 17%, last time I researched it, of Bitcoins that have been stolen were stolen at the exchange level when they're reporting back to the blockchain. Because remember, it's moving so quickly, right? That coin is... If you guys remember when they hacked the Colonial Pipeline, which shut down oil for us that went through the South, they got paid in Bitcoin. And somehow we got all that money back. Because I'm telling you right now, you know, if you don't, I mean, what country is the capital for technology? It's right here, the United States. And the NSA, National Security Administration, is the #1 source of that information. So if you, their job is to break what's called encryption. So you think that they have not broken the encryption codes? By the way, my favorite one was with the IRS. So this is like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. People were like, I'm not going to pay taxes on my Bitcoin. You don't know who I am. So the IRS sent a letter to the crypto exchange saying, okay, if you guys don't pay the taxes, if they don't pay the taxes, you'll pay the taxes. Yeah, well, so basically all this super secret stuff where we don't know what's going on, they send everybody 1099. So I'm just going to say, like, you know, okay, nothing's, our government knows, if the government wanted to, they could figure out who the drug dealers are. They could figure out who the hackers are. They could figure out who these bad people are. They just don't want to know. I mean, that's my opinion. Because if they can send them a 1099, they know where they live, they know their address, they've got some way to report the money. And if you want to know what's going on with the market or what's going on with the economy, you follow the gold. Pun intended, I mean money. Because I think Bitcoin is a great replacement for gold. I don't think it's a great replacement for your dollars because you can't, the price is not stable. It's going to have to be stable. If you put $100,000 in your checking account, you want to know it's worth $100,000 and 2 cents the next day. Not that it's worth $40,000 or worth $200,000. You don't want to know that. It does not bring you stability because what goes up comes down.
At one time,
Yeah.
wasn't there money backed up for gold?
Yes.
Like in Fort Knox and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that?
Yeah, so it was.
Still that away?
No. No, our money is backed up by one thing. No, yes, and no, but yes. It's backed up the fact that if you don't pay your taxes, a U.S. Marine shows up here with a gun and says, would you like to pay the taxes or would you like to be executed? And we'll take your money. Because the IRS can go seize your accounts. And
They got all that technology, why can't they get the money from all them millionaires and they pay taxes?
they're going to. I'm telling you, this is the way to go, right? You don't need a guy with a gun anymore. You just need a little nerdy programmer sitting there and finding the money. You know? Oh, your credit card doesn't work. Good luck eating today. By the way, like, I don't know, but I mean, I'm sure people, I'm not saying it's not bad to have some cash here, but like, do you have, you know, enough cash to pay your bills? And by the way, like the hotel I was at, cashless hotel. We don't take cash. We only take what? Here. Go try to pay for parking in downtown Nashville. Guess what you do? You put your credit card in, and they check how many hours you're there, and they bill you. And by the way, if you don't pay, they put a boot on your car. Last time Dara and Mark and Susan went to dinner, there were some people that didn't pay. And what did they have on their car? Big old boot. So,
Through Louisville, Kentucky, and we got on a toll road.
yeah. I mean, I went through a SunPass, my SunPass, all digital to my rental car thing. You know, it's easy. The way that cash has gone away is it's easier not to have it. I was playing a game with my kids, you know, well, 6 of them. And I'm going to give you money, you make change for me. Only one of my 6 kids could make change for me. You know, and think about it. You think they don't even know what dollars are really. Daddy just swipes. It's all free, right? No, John. No, James. That's James saying that. But anyway, no. So what he was doing was he was doing a Ponzi scheme. And actually, what's funny is this guy, Sam Bankman-Fried, he was giving money to both the Republican and Democratic Party to try to make himself name himself. So he actually, it was kind of crazy. He gave all his money publicly to the Democratic Party, and he gave all his money privately through his vice president to the Republican Party through non-reported or very limited reporting funds. So you would go out here and you would give him money for a fake Bitcoin that didn't exist, and he was giving it to both sides so that he could steal your money and hope that he wouldn't get in trouble. Now, he's not dead yet, but I'd say it's probably coming. That's just my opinion, because the one thing that you don't do is you don't mess with people's money, you know, and you don't mess with powerful people, right? I mean, Epstein, the guy that died, right? He died, and there were no cameras on when he was killed. Well, he had, remember in his book, you know, Bill Gates got divorced because of Epstein, because Bill Gates was going to those parties with those underage kids in another country. And his wife didn't like that. Big shocker, right? Bill Clinton was going with him. Donald Trump was going with him. If you want to get lower your view on people in life, look at all the people on the list. You've probably heard of.
The guy that whistleblower on Boeing, they found him dead.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where if you're, you know, the King of England's, you know, I mean, King of England's brother was going too. So the whole thing is very questionable. But, you know, if you start like, you know, the guy that started Victoria's Secret, right? That's how he got all his money, was he managed his money, but apparently a guy that designs women underwear might be gay. Who knew? Not a big surprise. Most people in that industry tend to be, I mean, I'm not very good at designing women's underwear. Shocker. I can't design anything. I can't draw anything. I can't draw the state of Florida. You know, so, I mean, if you want to find somebody artistic, they're going to have those skills. And, you know, I mean, that was probably coarse what I said. But I'm just saying is he didn't want that to be known. And so Epstein blackmailed him to keep him from his money. Epstein was a genius. He's a blackmailer. He used all those tapes and videos to blackmail people. Well, if you blackmail the most successful, richest people in the world, are you going to be surprised you're going to be dead? You're going to die. I mean, he probably knew it was going to happen eventually, but he's just riding his wave. And so, but it's very, one of the things that when you think about higher end of money stuff, you start attracting some real psychopathic people. Because if you think about him, Epstein didn't even go to college, but was able to pass off that he was a financial advisor, went to college, all these things. His intelligence level's got to be just off the charts high to be able to manipulate all these people, right? Impressive, but also scary because he didn't do it for the right reasons. He did it to manipulate them to take, I mean, he's worth what? At least almost $1 billion? Doing nothing for anybody? Crazy. Scary. Psychopath. Okay, so great article. Let's talk about inflation real quick, and then I know I'm running a little time on stuff. So there's a great article out yesterday, and we had a report today. And the question is inflation coming down? And Bloomberg this morning, they were talking about this. You know, when people look at inflation, they say to themselves, well, that means everything's getting cheaper. That's what the Federal Reserve wants. They want everything to get cheaper. That's not what the Federal Reserve wants. The Federal Reserve doesn't want you to go back to where a Whopper was 99 cents. The Federal Reserve wants a Whopper to cost $10, not $12. Whenever we look at inflation, we're not saying, what the Federal Reserve is not saying is, they're not saying they want everything to go back to where it was before inflation got control. They want to say, we're setting inflation as a new normal. A new normal. And that's a very important distinction, because when you ask people in surveys, when inflation is going down, they're saying, well, that means food's going to be cheaper at the grocery store. That's not what the Federal Reserve is trying to do. The Federal Reserve is trying to make sure that sandwich costs about the same amount of money tomorrow as it did today. Now, understand that distinction, because it's a very, very big distinction. The Federal Reserve is not trying to go back to 2019 prices. They're just trying to keep prices at 2022 levels. And that matters a whole lot. Okay? Now, one of the things about this article is there's something called quantitative easing. And there's something called quantitative tightening. Okay, we both know we got, President Biden put his budget out yesterday. I think it was yesterday. $7 trillion that he wants to spend. $7 trillion. Donald Trump has said, I am going to do massive tax cuts if I get elected. They both make me want to jump off the building, because they both want to spend too much money. If you want inflation, the government, if you want to stop inflation, it's very simple. What do? You stop printing money. If you want to increase inflation, you start printing money. Yes, spending money. If it's like one of the first things Joe Biden said in his State Union address was, we are going to give more people, we're going to forgive their student loans. Great. That's going to teach colleges not to make them borrow the money. If you want to, all they're saying is, we're going to give you money for your votes. We're going to print money for your votes. We've got a deficit in our country. It has to be dealt with, in my opinion. And so, when you look at quantitative easing, quantitative easing is where the Federal Reserve printed money during COVID. Now, when I say print money, it gets kind of confusing, because they're not actually taking $100 bills and just throwing them around. But what they're doing is, they're buying mortgage bonds. So basically, I've got a loan at my house for 2.75% interest for 30 years. The Federal Reserve made that happen, because nobody else would be dumb enough to give somebody a mortgage for less than the rate of inflation. Because you'd be what? The Federal Reserve lost $100 billion last year on those loans. And guess who paid for it? He did. Okay? So one of the articles that came out was really smart was, why did the Federal Reserve not just start burning that money? Why did they raise rates? Because here's what happens, right? When the Federal Reserve raised rates, somebody like you guys has money in that checking account, you start getting paid more what? And when you get paid more interest, you start what? Spending the money. So it's a really good point. It's a really insightful article. And it was, well, when the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates, they're still printing more money. Because when that Federal Reserve did a $100 billion loss, they just printed more money to cover it. Because what you're doing is, if my son Dylan goes to buy a car and he's got to pay 8% interest, he takes the 8% interest and he pays you guys 5%, and the bank keeps. That's what the bank wants anyway. And so, why did the Federal Reserve not just take the $7 trillion and just start burning some of that money first? Because if you really want to bring down inflation, all you got to do is reduce the amount of money in circulation. It's actually a lot smarter. Because now that you've got all this money in circulation, it doesn't go away. So the prices don't go down, they stay what? So next time there's a crisis, we'll have what? $10 trillion in circulation, and the prices will do what? Go up. But it's very interesting. because it's very possible the Federal Reserve has screwed up, big shocker, and what they should have done was get rid of some of this faster first. Maybe if they had, and how do you do that, right? So let's say the average mortgage in America is held for how long by most people? What do you guys think? That's what they want you to do. That's what they say. That's what the mortgage salesman says. Nope. Nope. You guys forget, what do people go through life? Like, what is the biggest asset in America? It's not the stock market. Property. So when your kids go to college, most people don't save for college. So what do they go do? They remortgage their house. You know, think about it, right? You know, you're 25, 30 years old, you have your first kid. You're about 48, 50, your income's going high. You start paying off your house. Your kids go to college. What do? You reborrow against your house to pay for college because you didn't save for college. Then your kids finish college. You borrow that money. And then you make the most money when you're 55, 54, 53, about that time period. And you start paying that house off again. Wait, interest rates went down. I'm going to remortgage my loan. Am I going to pay extra? Am I going to go from a 30 to 20 year? I'm going back to that 30 again. I know 65-year-old people getting 30-year mortgages. See it all the time, especially when rates were cheap. So what happens is the average mortgage in America only stays on the books 5 years. Which means, and it can be simple. Let's say Hayden's like, Brent, I like you, but I'm done. And he just leaves. He's like, I'm moving over to, I found a girlfriend in Alaska. I'm going to go get fish. And I'm going to go, you know, I really like hunting ducks. That's just he likes hunting ducks, not fish. So he says, I don't like it anymore. I'm going to live in the Mississippi River. I'm going to live in the Delta. And I'm going to start speaking Creole or something. And so he sells his house here, which he had a mortgage on, and he buys his new house next to his Creole girlfriend in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, right? And so, which I'm probably screwing that up pretty big because I don't know the river chain. But anyway, the point is, when he does that, he goes from a 2.75% mortgage now to an 8% mortgage. And because he's love-struck by the Creole woman, he doesn't care what his radar is, right? He doesn't look at his money. He's not thinking like an accountant. He starts thinking like a love-struck puppy. Okay, sorry, Hayden. And so what happens is, exactly. And so when that mortgage comes due, the Federal Reserve says, okay, we're going to take that money when Hayden pays off that loan and he sells his house, and we're not going to let it go back in the system. We're going to pull that money out of the system. And the Federal Reserve has been doing that since 2022. But why didn't they start with that? Because you think about it, if you want to bring the price of housing down, all you got to do is lower the amount of money in housing. You take that $7 trillion, take $2 trillion of it and say, we're just not going to let it reinvest. And that's probably had the most effect on inflation. It's actually getting rid of burning money. Now, the problem for the Federal Reserve is, while they're burning money, our federal government is spending money. And so like I'm not saying I don't like people having student loans. I'm not saying it would be nice to forgive people's student loans. It probably would be. However, it doesn't change the fact that college is too expensive. And the more money you print, the more it's going to cost. If you said that you can't borrow more money than what your degree makes in a year, which, by the way, when you go buy a house, they don't look at me and say, hey, I want a $10 million house. I'm going to go live in Fort Lauderdale, guys. What's the first thing the bank's going to say? Well, do you have 20% down? No. Do you make $5 million a year? No. Then you can't have the house. So why don't they do it for college? You want to be a social worker and you want to borrow $300,000 to go to college? No, not going to do it. That would fix the problem. So that's basically what we're looking at here. Now, what was interesting, I know I'm tight on time here, is when we look at inflation, the number one thing is labor cost. Now, the report this morning came out, and it showed labor didn't go up as much as they thought. But it was still going up about 4.2% a year. Now, if you want to bring down labor prices, what is the easiest way to do it? Huh?
Fire your people.
No. You got to have the workers. All these companies don't have enough workers. So what's the number one way that our companies in America can bring down their cost of labor?
Have more people,
Yeah! You bring in more immigrants.
they'll work cheap.
And they'll work cheaper. Because right now, if you're in Haiti and you just saw one of your best friends down that road, as soon as that road gets cleared, what are you doing? I'm swimming to Jamaica, or I'm trying to get to the Dominican Republic. I'm getting out of this place. And I don't care if I got to live in that closet. I ain't dead on that floor.
They changed the law where, I know I've been retired several years. Before I retired, we had to fill out papers with the United States, and they couldn't hire people that wasn't citizens.
Well, so what they do, of course, is,
You have to go around the system.
yeah, so the way the system works, which is unfortunate, is you have to e-verify your Social Security number, right? But it takes a long time for that computerized system to say if your Social Security number is good. So let's say, Brent, you give me a Social Security number and I put it in there. And a year later it says, whoop, this guy's illegal. Brent, did you give me the wrong Social Security number? Did you put the wrong number on there?
Oh, it was a typo.
Yes, I did. Here's your new Social Security number. Oh, a year later. Brent, I don't know what the deal is, man. You're a good worker, though, but the Social Security numbers, they look wrong. Do you have another one you can give me? Yes, I can. Okay, and so that's the system, right? That's the system. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fact that if you want to bring down inflation and you're running for re-election, what is something you can do? Bring in more labor, which is very funny because organized labor or unions is really against what? Bringing them in. And you know, like I grew up in St. Louis. If you go to St. Louis, it's a tale of two cities. There's the African American part of St. Louis, which is very impoverished, lots of violence, a lot of terrible things happening, and a lot of people not working. Then you go out to where I grew up, O'Fallon, Missouri, one of the safest 16 cities in America. Very wealthy, MasterCard's headquartered there. City used to have all their mortgage department there. A lot of good stuff, paying jobs. Well, if there's no labor, those companies would be encouraged to move into places like St. Louis and clean it up because there's people that could work for them. Tyson already announced, we want more immigrants. We want to hire all these refugees that came into New York because we need the people to cut your chicken. And by the way, who wants to cut chicken 24 hours a day? Oh, God. You know, cutting their heads off. You're slicing them off, right? It's a terrible job. It'd be the worst job ever. You know, it'd be awful. You would smell terrible. You guys ever messed with that much blood? It's a lot of blood. And so what's interesting about labor prices is that we're going up about 6% or 5.8% in 2022. Now they're going about 4.2. Now, housing has dropped. In 2022, the median home price sold in America was $480,000. When they started quantitative tightening, they got rid of these cheap mortgages. The median home price today is $420,000. Now, what's terrible is the rent payment. The average rent payment in America is $1,000 a month. In the Midwest, it's $790. In the Northeast and West Coast, it's $1,200 a month. And it's $900 a month in the South. So economics would say, if you want to get a cheap house, you move from California and you go to Detroit or you go to St. Louis. And I can tell you, I look at home prices and it's crazy. There's a really nice area in St. Louis called Forest Park area, and all these 12,000 square foot houses are selling there, and they're selling for less than $100 a foot because nobody wants to live there. You know, and that's what you see in that area. Now, rents did not go up much this last quarter, but they have been rising at about 6% a year. Now, so what does this mean for investors? Well, I know we're over time, so I'm going to make this really short and quick. It means the Federal Reserve is probably not going to cut rates as much as we thought they were back in December. Because inflation is still what? It's still here. And that means they might not. Now, if they do cut rates for political reasons to try to influence the election, we're going to get inflation back at us next year. Because if they cut them too early, what's going to happen? Inflation is going to take back off again. Now, that's probably what's going to happen. It also means that, now what's been a positive note this year is companies are just making a fortune on money. Right now, the S&P 500 is expected, the profits are expected to grow at 10.9% this year, which means they're really expected to grow about 14% this year. And what that means is that we are seeing a renaissance in two main areas in the United States. Industrial production facilities, because with all this automation, you can make, look, the Chinese workforce is retiring. They have made everything we have used for the last 20 years. They don't have enough people to replace those people. So India has taken off. Vietnam's taken off. Mexican stock market beat our stock market last year. So those factories are moving here, and they're highly automated. That new cheese factory they're building over there at 84 Lumber, where that used to be, I guarantee you there won't be that many workers there. Because if you guys have ever been to some of these factories that make food, you don't want anybody there. You know why you don't want anybody there? You don't want germs. If you ever want to see something crazy, the Budweiser factory in St. Louis is nuts. I have never seen so many beers in my life being made with nobody there working. The only guy there working on the Budweiser floor is somebody spraying down the floors, cleaning the floors. There is nobody in that facility. All these food facilities have basically nobody in them, which means it doesn't matter if you make that food here or you make it in China, right? If there's no people, it costs about the same amount of money. And then artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, the ability to, there's a ton of money going into it. I'm not saying it's going to replace all the workers out there, but it clearly is replacing some jobs and has potential. Walmart reported they're using that on their online site, and they believe they've caught up almost with Google on search capabilities. And basically what artificial intelligence is it's very highly programmed. They've done a lot of programming work. And so what's occurring is to make artificial intelligence work, microchips and computers got to go to a higher level, which means all of these companies are building new factories to try to compete. And it's funny, both Biden and Trump agree on one thing. They want that made where? Here in the United States, for security reasons. And so the one bipartisan thing we've got going for our country is everybody wants that to occur. And because everybody's on the same page, guess what's happening? They're building those factories here in America. And by the way, we had to give them money to make it happen. Now look, if you're a Ford Motor Company, you really care about interest rates because you can't make money in an electric car unless you get it at cheap rates. But if you're ASML, you can move your whole company to France and France will pay you to do it. Because you just got to make more chips, which means you got to make more machines so they can make more chips. You know why ASML can tell the Dutch what they want to do? Because they're 20% of their stock market. And all those people work for them. So who's king of that country? Right? They are. Because they make the rules. They got the gold. And so that's where, when we look at the economy, like last night, Oracle had 25% revenue growth for the quarter on cloud computing. My brother works there as well, so I don't want to put that there. I don't know any inside information on them, but that's what the report was. I did not talk to him. But that's what you're seeing is all these IT companies are just blowing up. And what that matters so much is let's talk about the S&P 500. So you guys know the S&P 500 position we have here in your account was up 32.8% year over year. That means that position, your portfolio, made the most money in the last year. But what's crazy is that's market weighted. So a company like Apple or a company like Microsoft or a company like NVIDIA, which went up 1,000% last year. Do you guys hear what I said? 1,000% in a year. those companies get a bigger portion of the action because they're bigger companies. If you go to S&P 500 equal weighted, which is where we say, hey, we're going to put the same amount of money in every company, it was only up 19.44%. Still good, but a 13 percentage point difference. Because if you're Bank of America, you really care about interest rates. If you're NVIDIA, you just want to make more chips. And you don't care how it's done. You'll pay somebody $100,000 a year to make those chips because you're making so much money on each chip, you don't care. And that's why the stock market has such a good start to the year, is because that part of the market is just exploding. And it's related to the labor shortage. You know, I mean, if you want to look at all these factories, you could talk about cars and Tesla. You know, we talked about Tesla only costing about 15 grand to make that car because they're so highly automated. And the UAW is talking about, you know, trying to unionize them. But look, it's not just Tesla. The company's making cheese. The company's making this water bottle. The company's making everything. They're all automating. And if they build those factories here in America, it's cheaper because you don't have to ship it. Right? And by the way, if the United States and China go to war, it's not going to be easy to ship that stuff from China to the United States. So if you're a company and you can have a highly automated factory which employs 5 people, and you can make it here in America, why would you not do that? You know? And it's happening. And that's why the stock market is seeing such a gain. It's also why if you just drive around Manchester, you know, that mega site just sold here last month. The state bought 2,100 acres to put massive factories here. They're doing that just because they want to throw some money away on a forest? No, they think something's coming. If you want to, like I drove from here to Morrison, there's a massive steel factory coming up right there. Massive. And they make sheet metal for tanks and military weapons. If you just look around town, the cheese factory coming over here, the demand for our area is out of the roof. And that's got nothing to do with interest rates. That has to do with just straight up economy is growing. And that's what's interesting this year is interest rates haven't come down. They've gone up a little bit this year, actually. It went down at the end of last year. But this other side of the story is pretty compelling that, hey, if all this stuff's got to be made here in America now, and by the way, that means more immigration because you still need more people, right? And so this last tidbit's kind of, I'll end with this. You know, Donald Trump, one of the things he says, he's going to build a wall. So he started building the wall, and the remote part of the Sonoran Desert. Well, to build a wall, what do you got to build first? Roads to get the wall there. They didn't finish the wall, but they built the roads in the middle of the desert. So if you're an illegal immigrant, before you had to walk through a desert. Now you get to walk on a road. So some of this stuff, not to pick on him or Joe Biden, because I'm not a fan of either one personally, but when you look at this situation, that's kind of dumb logic, right? You know, you're going to build a wall, but to build the wall, you have to build the infrastructure, which doesn't exist. So now the people that couldn't get through a desert before get picked up by the Border Patrol and get brought to America. Before they didn't have a road. So nobody picked them up. It's a desert. But we're going to build a road so we can build a wall. And we're not going to finish the wall, but we're going to pick them up in the desert.
When they pick them up, they ought to give them a social security number on the spot.
You're probably right. Because here's the thing. If you really think about it, they're paying taxes. And so the other day, if you would get rid of the citizenship thing and just go to identity, you know, like if you look at, you know, remember Apostle Paul was a Roman citizen. Not everybody else was. Well, in the Roman Empire, not everybody had rights. And that's probably the approach that eventually we're headed towards, unfortunately. But that's the situation. But that is the big picture is nobody's immigrating to Russia. Why? You guys see what India was saying yesterday? Give us our people back. All these people went over there, they didn't know they were fighting on the front lines. Because what happens is the Russians say, come immigrate here, we'd love to have you. And the first place they put them is where?
In the army.
Grab a rifle, go to Ukraine, charge. So, I'm telling you right now, I feel pretty good about Hayden not running off to Russia for a Russian woman. But the Creole thing, I don't know. So I'm just saying, because he's the right age. I'm just kidding. Hayden. So and so when you're looking at stuff, that's what you're looking at. And people, it's always funny. America's always been a place of immigrants because it's a great place to live, and people want to go somewhere to have a better life. And immigrants, if you want to know how our country's doing versus everybody else, okay, who's going to immigrate? And by the way, we got an election this year, so if Donald Trump wins, I'm leaving America. If Joe Biden wins, I'm leaving America. They're going to be here. They're not going anywhere. It's all a bunch of crap, and that's the thing. But at the end of the day, the number one issue really is inflation, and the number one issue to vote on is inflation, and neither one of them have addressed it. I don't care so much about, if you cut my taxes, but everything costs 30% more. That didn't work. You got to deal with this. That's going to affect your lives more. Because when you're going to the grocery store, all that money they printed, you're paying more for everything. That's what affects you. That's what affects me. That's what affects your wealth. And they're not even talking about it in the press. It's not even a debate question. This should be the number one question on your money. And how you should vote is, who is going to spend less money? And I'm going to vote based on that because I've got a personal preference, but you got to find your own, which we don't talk about politics much. We're going to say, hey. But anyway, thanks for coming today, guys. Sorry, we're a little long. Oh, yeah. Investment Insights Education Place. Do your best to find accurate tax, legal, and accounting advice. Start tax, legal, and investment advice for your unique situation for making a decision. Thanks.